So what I'm going to do in this video is basically just outline the main studying habits that you have to form at the start of your ACT prep so that you can get through and improve your score as fast as possible, get to your target score with minimal effort, and get there as fast as possible. I'm going to give you the main things that I saw work best for me as well as for the other students that I've tutored, and let's see how you can apply them for yourself. So we're going to talk the main strategies you should be using, the studying habits, as well as the test taking tips and techniques, things like timing, things like that you should be following. So let's just go section by section. Let's start with English, and we'll go through English, math, reading, science, and writing as well, because writing is also important. Also, before we get into the video, there are 6 free practice exams linked in the description below. So I recommend you use the strategies that you see in this video on those exams and try to improve from there. So let's get started with English. So what do you do for studying the ACT English section? First, you obviously have to start by practicing. This is a very skill-heavy section, meaning there are a lot of skills on the English section that are going to be tested again and again from practice exam to practice exam, from exam to exam. And you have to know these skills in order to do well on the exam. Now, how do you know these skills without any study guide or anything like that? You take practice exams, you familiarize yourself with the test, and you learn from your mistakes. Those 3 things. So you practice, right? Let's say you take 1 or 2 practice exams, you start out. When you take a practice test, go back and look at your mistakes. See what went wrong, see what mistakes you made, and try to learn from the correct answer options. You might not be able to do this every time with every problem, but just do your best to learn from the correct answer. And when you keep making the same mistakes from exam to exam, which is going to happen inevitably, you can start to learn over time, with the different problem types, testing the same skills, you can develop an understanding of the skills as you go. And once you're at, maybe 8, 9, 10 practice exams and you follow this procedure, you've most likely learned a lot, or if not most or all of the skills that you had been initially struggling with. And that's how you learn from your mistakes and improve through just analyzing the things that you did wrong before. And this process really works because you're learning the main content that the English section tests. And if you know that specific content that is going to be showing up every single time, success is inevitable. And this is a process that helped me improve my English score from a 24 to a 35. I went from a low 20s to a high 30s, near perfect score. And I'm sure you could do the same if you follow this procedure. Really try to learn from your mistakes and go from there. Also, when I say for timing on the English section, keep it very simple, straightforward. Give yourself 9 minutes per each passage. You have 5 passages, 15 questions, and 9 minutes per passage. Keep it simple and straightforward. Now let's go on to math. So math is very similar to English in that math is a very skill-heavy section. Meaning that, again, there is a set of skills that's going to be tested every single time on every math exam. And the more you familiarize yourself with this skill set, the better you're going to do on the math test. Now, the same principle applies to mastering these math skills. You have to take practice exams, build practice exam quantity, get up to the 10, 11, 12 at least when you're practicing, and you have to learn from your mistakes as you go so that you can see the mistakes that you're making and fill those skill gaps by learning from the correct answers. And again, this process might be a bit challenging on your own when it comes to learning from the correct answers, but it really helps if you do something like group studying, or if you have a tutor or someone that you're studying with, that you can bounce ideas off of one another, you can bounce strategies off of one another, and learn the content together. Because a lot of the times when you're group studying, maybe you have one weakness, but another student that you're with, a friend, a peer, a classmate, whatever, that's a skill of theirs, that's a strength of theirs, and you can learn from them. And again, as you do this process again and again from exam to exam, you will get better at the skills. It just takes initiative and an understanding that this process is going to work, and that it can help you improve your skills as you go through and repeatedly learn from your mistakes and see what you're doing wrong. For math, I've always recommended the 20-40 timing technique, which is where you answer the first 30 questions in the first 20 minutes, the last 30 in the last 40 minutes, which means you're giving yourself double the amount of time to answer the harder questions, because a lot of them will take twice as much time. So try your very best when you start the exam to finish the first 30 questions in the first 20 minutes. And if you don't get this your first try, it's totally okay. Just take the initiative, try your very best, and if you keep trying this process, if you just make it a mental note that I'm going to do my very best to answer the first 30 and the first 20, then you'll gradually get better and better at it, and eventually, hopefully, you'll get there. And once you're there, it helps a lot in terms of saving time to answer those questions at the end, because if you do not have time for those ones at the end and you're just spending maybe 1 or 2 minutes for them, then it's very likely that you're going to get them wrong, and that's going to bring your score down a lot, especially if, you know, the question's 50 and above, you're maybe getting 6, 7, or 8 of them wrong. So you really want to give yourself time to answer those correctly. All right, moving on to reading and science. Now, the way the ACT works, English and math are very similar. Reading and science are also very similar. So with reading, the improvement process, again, starts with practice. Once you practice, you should be learning from your mistakes, building practice quantity. Now, with reading, it's kind of tough to actually learn from your mistakes, because the mistakes that you're making, it really all just comes down to how well you read and skim or understand the passage. So that's what we're going to focus on. So how exactly do you go about understanding the passage to the best of your ability? First, you need to use a strategy that saves you time. You have maybe 8 to 9 minutes to get through one passage, and there's 4 passages, right? So this means that you should be taking no more than 2 or 3 minutes to skim the passage and understand it in a very basic sense. I never recommend reading in depth. Just try to get the basic gist by looking at everything. Look at all the words, don't try to understand everything. This means you're skimming, reading really fast, you're just doing your best to get through it all and get the basic understanding that is required for the questions. Also try to understand where the main ideas in the passage are located, because when you're going through answering questions, it's good if you know a certain reference point where a key detail or a key event is taking place, so it helps with re-referencing the passage when you need to do that. So that's the skimming strategy. I just kind of threw a bunch of things at you right there, but keep those things in mind. Understand passage organization. Don't try to take in too much detail, because a lot of it won't be asked about, so get the basic gist. That's what that second point means, and you gotta go fast. You gotta go 2 to 3 minutes or less when you're going through. Now, when it comes to what exactly you should be looking for, there are 3 key things that most ACT reading questions will be asking you about. And if you can take note of these things as you are reading the passage or skimming the passage in those 2 to 3 minutes, it'll help you a bit in terms of getting some of the questions right. So the 3 things are relationships between people, things, objects, events, things like that. So the first thing is relationships. Then you have emotions that people feel, emotions that are taking place in a relationship or between one person or another, or a person and an object. How do people feel about certain things? How does the narrator or the author feel about certain things? Take note of these things and annotate them if you can. So again, 2 things so far. We have relationships and emotions. The third thing is events. So if there is a passage that's talking about a story, you have a narrative, or it's a historical passage, you're gonna have to take note of sequence of events, because this is a question type that is asked about, and a lot of the times you will have to know the chronology of these passages, where things happen, when they happen, as well as what things cause certain things to happen. And knowing the order of those things is very important, as well as just knowing events in general. Getting a basic idea of those things. So keep all those things in mind as you're practicing and studying for the reading section. They should help you a lot. Now, science is just about the same exact procedure. You gotta read really fast, try not to take in too much detail, and that's basically it. Now, the only thing that's really different about science is what you're specifically looking for. Science is most likely gonna be a bit easier because it's the same as the reading test, but instead of all text, you have some images, which makes it a bit easier. A lot of people are visual learners, like myself. I like visuals, pictures, things I can see and understand. Visually, a picture speaks 1,000 words. That's why the science test is a bit better than reading. So this makes it a bit easier. And when you're skimming, the main thing that the main procedure you should be following when you're going through and skimming a passage is you look at a table or a graph or a figure, and you just look at the main variables, the main axes labels, and try to understand in a very basic sense, very quickly, what relationship there is between these variables, if there is any. So just looking at the figures very quickly, that should give you a very basic understanding of what the relationship is, like I said, if there is one. Now, in terms of what specific things you want to look for in the passage itself in general, like I said, there's 3 things for reading and there's 3 for science as well. For science, you have variables, so what variables are in the passage, what things are changing, what are the most important passage components, the variables themselves. Is it speed? Is there time? Is there something else? Is there a certain quantity, a volume? Take note of these variables, circle them, annotate them. You have to know what the variables are because they will be asked about. The second thing is the relationships. How are those variables related? Perhaps maybe there's a figure that's telling you that as one variable increases in the x-axis, another variable increases as well. So you're going to have to know that these 2 variables are proportionally linearly related, or quadratically, or exponentially, or something like that. Take note of the relationships that exist between different variables. And you don't have to understand all the relationships when you're going through and skimming on the science section, but take note of them and try to understand them as fast as possible. One thing that I did not mention is that you are supposed to try to read the science passage in less than 1 or 2 minutes, because you're going to have about 5 to 6 minutes per passage. keep that in mind as you are skimming. And the third thing is, so I already said the first two are variables, relationships. The last one is differences between different passage elements. So there are some passages like research summaries where you're given multiple experiments, and there's also conflicting viewpoints where you're given multiple viewpoints or hypotheses, where you're gonna have to compare the hypotheses or the experiments, the similarities, differences that they express. So keep those differences in mind as you are reading these passages. Again, only for the passages that have multiple experiments, where it lists out experiment 1, experiment 2, experiment 3, or there's multiple trials or multiple studies, or for passages that have multiple viewpoints like student 1, student 2, student 3, or hypothesis 1, hypothesis 2, etc. So for things like that, you need to take note of differences because compare and contrast is very common. There are practice exams that I have seen, or official exams as well, for the science exam where 25% of the questions were just comparing, where you have to compare these different viewpoints or compare different experiments or just simply know the differences, and that's what the question is based off of. So keep those things in mind because they are very important and they will most definitely be asked about. So that is the first 4 sections of the exam. I am not done yet. There's still writing. For writing, I say there's tons of writing prompts on the internet. Just go look up some ACT writing prompts. You'll find something that's remotely similar to the exam. Apart from that, you can also look at the actual ACT practice exams that are on the link in the description below, as well as on any other resource on the internet. Try to use those. Just practice writing. There's a general procedure that I'm not going to really go into because it is kind of time consuming, but we have other videos about that where I discuss the main procedure that I recommend you use to master the writing section and to guarantee that you're going to get at least a decent score on the section, you know, with organizing your argumentation points. I'll link those in a card somewhere as well so you can see those videos. But apart from that, that should help you guys with studying for the ACT. Like I said, I just laid out the main important components of how you should be studying and approaching the exam when it comes to timing, when it comes to what studying habits you should have, as well as what strategies you should be using. I hope this video helped you, and if you have any other questions, please feel free to leave them in the comments below, as well as on our website we have a chat box. You can leave any questions you have there. We're also scheduling free tutoring sessions for you guys if you want. You can check those out in the description below. Ask me any questions you want in your tutoring session. It could be about prep, it could be about college admissions, getting scholarships. I'll help you guys because I've been there before. I've been in you guys' shoes before. So that's all I have for you guys. Again, if you need practice exams, there are 6 linked below for free, and I will leave you guys with that. Good luck on the ACT. See ya.